So, ladies and gentlemen, it is my absolute honor and privilege to be able to introduce to you my good friend, the man, the myth, the legend, Mr. Dave Hillis. How are you, mate?
I'm doing good. It's nice
Good.
to be doing this with you.
Oh, it's great to see you, mate. It's great to see you in your studios looking fantastic. Really, really good there.
Yeah, I wish you could see the other part of the equipment, but oh well.
Yeah, it looks really cool. So, Dave, how did you get into doing what you're doing? How did you get into sound engineering, and what sparked your interest in wanting to get into music?
Well, yeah, okay. There lies the two things. I really never had any specific ambition to be an engineer or that side of things, which I ended up being more known for now. But it was really music, that got me into it in general. Just you know, right from really early age, I mean, 5 years old, I started playing around at the piano, uh, at our neighbor's house, and my parents and brother noted my older brother noticed that, and I would get toy guitars and things for I was just always playing around with that, and then was completely obsessed on with TV, like anything that was on back in the days of my age, where it was, like whether it was variety shows or if I saw Michael Jackson on TV or
Wow.
um, you know, even even my dad watching, Hee Haw, which is a big country music show over here in the States, and just anything I would see, Donnie and Marie or any of the Osmonds or anything that was on TV that had to do with music and being a pop star or a rock star or something like that. That's what I was into, and just fascinated by, and so I think I wanted to play drums first, and then I kind of saw guitar was kind of the thing, and being a guitarist and a singer, and 'cause that's the spotlight. So all that kind of stuff I was attracted by. I started collecting 45s really young,
Wow.
and singles, and you know, discovering all that early, 70s pop music, rock music stuff, and then later as I grew into teenage years, discovering heavy metal and punk rock and that kind of stuff, and I started taking guitar lessons at 10, and then found the real. I was we had moved from New York to Seattle, and found the really hot guitar teacher there who taught all a lot of the great players that came out of the Seattle area. And I was just infatuated being in a band and starting bands. I started a band way too early. Got myself in recording studios way before I wasn't ready, but
What?
I saw that that's how things were done, and
Yeah.
I was very ambitious with it, very like drove right into it, and so the engineering, the studio stuff came about really kind of later in the sense of me doing it, but I did get into studios really early, and that was really off of my own um, thinking that that's what I had to do. I never got into doing cover songs playing. I would start writing right away, and it was more probably out of being lazy
Wow.
and not wanting to figure things out. It's too hard, so I'd write my own kind of stuff, um, which was a cursing and a blessing. I think I probably would have been better if I would have learned more stuff uh, in that regard. But I started writing my own stuff right away, and I just looked, in back then in the phone books and whatnot, and found studios, or I'd see in the local music magazines where another band recorded, and kind of became uh, that was kind of like my thing. Like I would have part-time jobs, and I would save money and go into local recording studios, and from 8 tracks moving up to 24 tracks, and so I understood recording my music to tape in that way, and then I kind of backtracked to getting a 4 track and things like that. Being influenced by a friend who had one, I saw he was doing it at home. I thought, oh, then I could start maybe learning. So that's kind of how I entered the whole studio world and recording and things like that. But I was more really concentrating on being a guitarist and a songwriter and things like
Yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah. That's good though. But the fact you went onto the dark side at the beginning, playing the
Yeah, I
drums.
just jumped in way too, and yeah, I look back on it, it's really funny, and I didn't know anything about it. It was black magic to me, them doing what they did. I
You find
really
that,
didn't even think I'd ever learn it. I thought that's way too advanced stuff.
yeah, you find a lot of guitarists do actually learn the drums first. I personally didn't, but I know a lot of friends have gone that route. Have gone.
Yeah, well, funny enough, with musicianship wise, I mean, I have horrible rhythm. That was like always hurt me as a guitar player. I was a great lead player, horrible rhythm. But then later on in life, as I started programming drums and getting very much into electronic stuff, I that was how I learned how to
Yeah, yeah.
get rhythm, because if one thing everybody would yell at me about in the studio, it was my rhythm, so
So,
and my
so
timing.
who were your mentors and key figures and who shaped your passion and approach into getting into engineering then?
Into engineering, I
Yeah.
didn't really have a mentor, or because I was not planning on that. I really had no intention whatsoever to be a recording engineer. It was all about I wanted to be a signed recording artist.
Yeah, yeah.
I wanted to be successful in that arena, and in some degree, I was, and kind of fell into engineering, and then I got lucky with timing of being in Seattle at the right studio at the right time, and the 90s happening, and some of the being able to work on some records that just ended up blowing up while I was still pursuing my career as an artist.
And can you remember your first project
Well, I mean,
or your
first
earliest
real
project?
project was so I well, there's a little bit of a lead up to that. So I was, like I said, it was, 89, late 80s there, and the birth of grunge was happening, but we didn't know it. Because 89 really was when, you know, that stuff was being born, um, unto the masses. And so I was doing like a lot of guys in the Seattle area, because there was tons of bands. There's a really vibrant music scene, tons of places to play, rehearsal spaces. There was everything you needed. Um, so there's bands playing musical chairs with people joining this band and move to that band. All kinds of things. For instance, I had a rehearsal room where me and Mike McCready from Pearl Jam shared a room, and so like we were all going to see each other's bands, passing each other's in the hallways, going to the same party. So it was all of that kind of a thing. And there was a studio called London Bridge, which was fairly new, but these two brothers had really built something that um, was different. And I didn't realize at the time, but I was blessed that Seattle had a ton of recording studios.
Mm.
There's just such a vibrant scene. Everything from just really elaborate home ones to full on studios. But uh, these two brothers, Rick and Raj, built a studio to kind of out surpass everybody. And they've got a designer from Vancouver who's English guy, but designed like famous studios, really great studios um, in Vancouver, and built this amazing room. And he's told, need a Neve and a Studer, and they bought a Neve that came from Paris, and they bought a Studer tape machine, and this amazing big room, and just there wasn't a place quite like that or as good. And I had heard, so as my band was playing, all of a sudden I've heard from a friend I came across an Alice in Chains demo, who I'd seen and were friends with them, and a Mother Love Bone demo, and I go, these are sounding really like, what's going on? Where are they recording? What's happening? And
Yeah.
I found out they were at London Bridge, so I booked a session with whatever I was doing. I was doing my own kind of band thing, a new project I was trying to put together, and I said, I got to get in there, and got money together. I remember calling them and asking if they take credit cards, and they were like, "What? No." And because I was going to finance it some way, and I got in there, and I worked with a guy named Don Gilmore, funny enough, who I took his place at the studio eventually, who went on to do Linkin Park and
Ah,
some other big bands. So we all had this route we took at
mm.
London Bridge. And I didn't know at the time, but it was his first solo engineering gig was with me in my band. Rick Prosher, who you might recognize the name from, who done Pearl Jam, the producer for Pearl Jam, Temple of Dog, Alice in Chains, and all that, and brother of the owners of the studio. I later saw him at a club that we all went to, uh, and he had asked me, "Hey, how'd the session go?" And I said, "Oh, it went really great, you know, blah blah blah." And he said, "Oh, because that was Don's first time, and Don's leaving now. He's going to go out and he's doing something else." And I'm like, started my wheels start turning, and then he'd ask me, "Hey," he saw that I kind of knew everybody at this club because it was the club where we all hung out, and he said, "Hey, you know, if you bring some people back, we could have a party at the studio." So all these like life, I'm just going, man, this is an opportunity here. And I went back to London Bridge with him, and he, like you said, he told me about Don not going to be there, and and that he might be looking for an assistant, and I just hounded him. And I took that opportunity to like, I might be interested in that and all this. And then I hounded him on the phone for weeks and put together a reel to go show him, and showed up and finally got a meeting with him. And he didn't even listen to anything, didn't want to know about any of all these things I wanted to tell him and my grandiose plans of conquering the music business, and just want to know if I could show up and be there and do all, and all stuff. And I did. And one of my first days was he was working on the mixes of Temple of Dog.
oh
And
well.
what was weird about that is that like I said, I was already friends and knew most of these guys. So it was kind of like bittersweet to me because I was working in a studio, but I was working on my friendly competitions music.
Yeah, yeah,
And I
yeah,
was a little jealous that they were getting record deals and haven't been doing this. So it was kind of weird like that, but I knew that it would be good for me to do this and learn more. And I kind of knew stuff, but it was a neat console, and and the big difference was it was so the next record that was coming through was a band called Love and Ice from Portland, and they had just got signed to Interscope. So I helped Rick on the mixes and mainly assisting him on the Temple of Dog stuff and learning the studio and patch bay and things like that, getting familiar. And the first project we did was for Interscope for a signed band with a budget. It's a big record, and he basically threw me in the fire. He's just like, "Let's go!" And I was in complete panic the whole time, uh, making sure I'm doing the patch bay right because he had a way. Rick had a way of looking at you and make you feel really stupid or really bad if you did anything. There was no coaching or cuddling.
yeah,
And he was a perfectionist, and so I mean, I kind of hated it in a way, and
yeah,
and I had to do everything else, like you guys kind of refer to as a T-boy or whatever. I had to do,
yeah, yeah,
clean. I had to, whatever, run errands too while engineering. I was everything, all encompassing assistant, uh, not in studio assistant, but like personal assistant and the studio guy and the janitor and everything else, all wrapped in one.
wow.
Um,
But that's great training, though. I mean,
oh yeah,
that's a great way of introducing you to everything.
right. So I quickly learned, like, wow, I guess I'm going to become an engineer. And I was kind of in turmoil over it because I really wanted to be pursuing my music and stuff and recording my own records. But it was great seeing, because it was the first time I actually saw what it was like if you got signed and you were making a real record. And
Mm,
I found out, wow, it's a whole different world than all these sessions I've been doing for the last few years. This is a whole this is for real. This is an art. It's an art to making a record, and like all these steps and a producer and what he really does and what engineers and the tapes and all the things of like, back then, there was so much care to taking care of the takes, labeling things that like you do it now at Pro Tools, but we had 2-inch tapes, and you had to remember these tapes might be sent to another producer, another studio in Hollywood or in LA or New York, and also the pressure was just much more, and the attention to details and all those things, which I know still go on today with Pro Tool sessions and things like that.
This was in the days of a razor blade and a Chinagraph pencil then?
Correct. No Pro Tools, no computers yet.
Yeah,
It
because
was
I used
all
to remember
edits.
trying to edit, and then if you did the wrong edit and it's on the floor and you're searching
Yeah.
on the floor for it.
You know what's even more scary than that, that people skip, they think of that, but, a lot of times, like, spot erasing, or using the controller on the tape machine, your punch-ins being on time, not going over a great vocal take, uh, um, comping tracks via on the tape machine as opposed to dragging and dropping them around on Pro those
Yeah.
things, and, like, if I'm running a machine and Rick's producing, like, I'd be sweating and under pressure all day. I'd get done, like, and I'd have shakes because I would be so stressed all day to make sure my punches were right when he was wanting them to be right on a particular take, via instrument or whatever it might have been. Like, it was there's no undo buttons, no,
So
delete or
he was
undo.
quite tough on you then. He was quite.
Yeah, it was
Yeah,
stressful.
I can
And,
imagine.
but like I said, watching records being made properly, to this day, it was my biggest education. Like, I learned, wow, this I kinda knew maybe why I hadn't gotten a deal yet, or what it showed me, wow, I wasn't good enough. Like, there was, and there was, the thing we all complained about then, A&R people and the labels, and, it there was a thing there where there's a vetting period. You had to make demo after demo to maybe and learn while you're doing that in studios to maybe get a demo deal if an A&R guy heard you at a label, to do more demos financed by label, to then get to work with a producer and do a record. So by the time you were making a record, you were so ready and producer savvy, and your songs were worked out and all that. Where, I noticed now, nowadays you get people start a band, they write, or an artist, they write their first 5, 10 songs and they're making a record and they're putting it out,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
where there was much more of a longer growth process in that. So yeah, so anyway, all of a sudden I'm an engineer, and the 90s and records are coming in. Mostly my friends at this point, the demos for Mookie Blaylock, which became Pearl Jam, and then some success came from those. So then Rick as a producer was growing, and we got management, and then we started getting other artists, like we're coming in from other parts of the United States and world because of the success of those. So then I found myself an engineer, and I was like, and liking it at that point. But then quickly I wanted to move on. And
So you ended up working with. You've worked with quite a lot of artists over the years then?
yeah, yeah, that's been my yeah. I so Well, it's funny you say that. So the interesting, so I'm still during that period, that early 90s period there, doing these records and I'm still writing and stuff. And I had a demo some stuff I did with this vocalist, female vocalist named April Devereaux. And while things started blowing up, when we had management representing the production side, uh, I was going to Los Angeles and I was able to hand out tapes or a tape, kind of just not really expecting much because I was kind of now doing this other thing. And because I was around all this thing that landed in the right people's hands, and all of a sudden I had calls for my project from Epic, and we ended up signing with Island Records, and then all of a sudden I had a record deal in the midst of my career with Rick taking off.
Yeah.
Um, and I had to take it. So we did that, and we ended up doing. So I kind of took a hiatus from that, but we were still under the London Bridge umbrella. So Rick ended up producing a record. We made a record, um, and so I kind of fulfilled the dreams of getting my record deal and getting signed and doing that, and had a wild ride, but didn't last. We didn't really make it. We got dropped, and then I went back into production and been
Yeah.
into.
And did and if you had a choice, I mean, what do you prefer? Did you enjoy the engineering back then? Was it?
Yeah, well, yeah, I wouldn't have traded it for anything because, it so much gave me a more rounded version. I think if I would have went the other way and just would have, I would have just been a guitar player in a band, like, and this has definitely broadened my whole. Uh, it's made me so much better in general in the music industry because I've gotten to work with so many different artists and great players and writers, and I got to know how the business side worked. So I always, one of the advantages I think I have a lot coming to work with people is that I've been on both sides of the glass. I like to say, I've been a recording artist. I know what it's like to be produced by big producers. And I've been an engineer watching big producers produce and working for them and seeing a record being made by big artists. And I've been a producer producing artist. So I like to think I'm pretty well rounded in the whole thing,
Yeah,
and I've
yeah.
seen the industry through its ups and downs and all sides of it. So, um,
So you've gotten to work with a lot of legendary artists, Alice in Chains. You mentioned Temple of the Dog, James Blunt as well, um, Afghan Wigs, and obviously you mentioned Pearl Jam and the Ten album. Um, did you have any idea at the time that the album would become as iconic as it did?
the Pearl Jam.
Yeah,
Well,
Pearl Jam.
actually, all the records you just mentioned,
I mean, well, obviously Alice in Chains, SAP.
yeah,
Yeah, I
I
mean,
never really, yeah, I didn't think any of those were going to do well. It's all of the things. There's so many other records that I've worked on that never saw the light of day, or bands broke up, or label dropped, or whatever. Uh, that I thought would do so much better and that had chances and things, and even some of my own, whatever. Uh, and the ones that did were the ones I really was either indifferent about, didn't think it was going to, or and I like to think that I know a good thing when I hear it, but that's the other thing in the business. You never know what's going to hit. Like, you just
no.
don't. But
Yeah.
with Pearl Jam and the Seattle stuff, it's weird because I was so close to it. Nothing there, that movement wasn't happening yet. It's like a lot of times it's not like artists that I've the artists that I've worked with that are household names now, are big now. When I worked them, they weren't. So
No.
it wasn't like a situation where I went, oh, I'm working with Cher or I'm working with Madonna, and it's always this big thing already going in. Um, so it was like I didn't know because like they didn't know. No, nobody knew. We didn't know grunge music was going to be a big thing or anything. So in that regard, yeah, no, I didn't. And I remember thinking about something with Pearl Jam. I was in the studio alone with him. Rick would go home in the evenings a lot and leave me to record and track because they would just keep playing take after take because they were really adamant about capturing live takes. And I remember thinking one night, this weeks into it, thinking, at least they had Mother Love Bone, the success of Mother Love Bone.
Yeah.
Because at the time, them getting a deal with Mother Love Bone, even though Andy died and it went away, I thought I was kind of feeling bad for them, thinking that this record wasn't going to do anything. And that, at least they had that bit of success with Mother Love Bone getting the record deal and stuff. So, I mean, that's what I was thinking. Meanwhile, we're recording something that became much bigger than anything they could have done with Mother Love Bone, maybe, or anything. I mean, who would have thought? And like I say, plus I was so close to knowing them. They were so part of the scene. Same with Alice in Chains, and Lane. Like well, they were the first ones to see kind of take off. They really were the first ones. And that was kind of incredible. And by the time they came in on some of the things I worked on, they'd already done Facelift. But once again, it was just so that I already knew that it was hard to really put it to realize it at the time. I remember for the first 10 years afterwards, I sometimes I didn't even have it on my reel or my resume, my
Really?
CV. Yeah, I just didn't think it took me a while to really realize, oh my God, they're iconic or
This is a
whatever.
big deal. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, now I get it, but of course, obviously, but it didn't really sink in. There's some even with Rick and Ron, like it was kind of it was like too close to home. It was kind of odd, and they went off and experienced it too. They went off, became rock stars. We were there and on to doing other things.
I remember traveling to college, and 1992 around that time, I think, wasn't it? 92, 91,
Yeah,
92.
yeah, 91, 92 is
And
when.
I remember, and it was like Wayne's World in my car.
Yeah.
Having to listening to Pearl Jam and Alice in Chains and all this scene.
Yeah, no, it was like knew it was big. You saw it on MTV. We got it. Um, but I think I don't know. We were still kind of young and cocky too, and I think we thought there's more to come and like whatever. I don't know. It's hard. I don't know why, but and like I said, it was close to us, so it wasn't like we didn't have a fandom tour, and because we worked on like I saw it so from the beginning and working on it in such raw forms that it was hard to take it that it
Yeah, yeah. So you mentioned, so talking about audio tech, then the recording process. You mentioned obviously, you're on tape and everything, and obviously things have moved on a bit. But was there any particular techniques, miking techniques, or you did anything that was kind of different to what you would do this day and age, or
the good thing about working and coming up under Rick was he was very straightforward, like very classic about everything, pristine, good, technically good sounds, good,
Mm,
no necessary tricks or anything. So like even in the studio, it was a great studio, but it was all meat and potatoes type stuff. Like we didn't have
yeah, right,
tons of mics and tons of outboard. We just had
mm,
the good
the base,
necessary stuff, all the classics. Yuri 1178 compressor and the right your classic microphones. I think no more than we needed. Rick would never like buy more gear. Very rarely, he's very he wasn't like I call it gearhead, but he knew good stuff and would only want that basic necessity stuff. So I learned just good technique, and we had a unbelievably great console. Um,
what
the Neve
console
we
was it?
it was a Neve and it had the 1081 EQs, and
Wow.
it was just it's same console that they had at Sound City,
Oh, right.
where yeah,
Yeah,
so those are the consoles to make a rock record on, and
yeah,
we were making rock records, as it were. Really standard stuff like we had two 87s and two U47s, so we had the two pair of two good Neumanns, no more, no less. The condenser Neumanns, 57s, 421 Sennheisers, your basic stuff. And when we were working with bands like Pearl Jam, for instance, or Temple of Dog stuff was just basic good songs with a guitar player who had a Marshall and a Twin and a 59 Bassman, a couple pedals. It wasn't, we just got good tones going through the Neve, right EQ, just it was all like that. Vocals, like for Pearl Jam was, I think we decided on the U47 for him. We usually try which one, 87 and 47. We stuck with 47, you know, through the Neve to U87 or the Yuri 1176 compressor and 1178 actually we used which is the stereo version. So we'd use that and to tape, it was all that. And Rick focused on performance, a good sound to tape and the writing. And that's how you make good,
yeah,
timeless
yeah.
music, right? Me and my style was completely different. I throw everything in the kitchen sink at it. I want, walls of sound, 10 amps, 1,000 pedals. Let's try running it through this to that to that to that. So
That's like me.
our styles were very different, forced me to learn like how he does. So that was great. Um, and Rick utilized me a lot as he knew I was a band guy. He wasn't from that world. Rick, I wouldn't call a rocker or a band guy. He was more classically trained pianist. He was very intelligent guy, very, he wasn't that. I was a rocker kind of, and I could communicate with the band. They knew me. If I didn't know them, we quickly became friends and joked around. So I'd kind of make that vibe a little more neutral for them, where Rick could be a little standoffish and not of their world, kind of, and intimidating. And with the guitar players, I'd understand pedals and, you know, I was up to date on whatever, and I knew tone and guitars, and I was a guitar nerd and amp nerd, and I would facilitate that world to Rick between Rick and the band a lot.
To get that drum sound, it was just obviously just standard meat and potatoes. Just
If you're talking in particular with the stuff at London Bridge, the big drum set, that is because, like I said earlier, they just had an amazing, to this day, the best sounding drum room I've ever worked in. I've worked in a lot of studios all over, and it just sounds amazing. And the trick to that was the two U87 Neumann mics in the back of the room. You just put them up, and you'd pull up the faders, and you have instant
wow,
big, great drum sounds.
wow,
And it felt almost like cheating a lot there because honestly, you just mic the kit up your basic way and turn up the room mics, and you just have a great running through the Neve. And anything you do on the EQs, you can't. It's hard not to get a good drum sound there. So, but also lucky enough to have, I used to have great drummers on these records,
yeah, yeah,
and another thing Rick was, that I learned from him, super particular about, you know, tuning. The drums had to be tuned, constant
yeah,
checking the tuning
yeah.
and things like that, all that. So, uh, getting good sounds from the source and then everything else just easily amplified that. That's something I learned from him. And then you can be like me and throw all the tricks in and all that stuff later. But yeah, so
It's very much about the musicianship and about the touch, isn't it? Because I find that
yeah,
as a live engineer, you can chuck all the tools at things, and if you've got a terrible musician or a drummer on stage, you'll never get it sounding good, no matter what,
right.
And
And
it's very
like
much about touch, and everything else is kind of the icing on the cake kind of thing.
totally. And the thing I really learned right away was pre-production. Like Rick Prosher was just that was his main. If you want to know his trick, it was pre-production. He would spend so much time before rolling tape on anything on parts and pre-production and arrangements and things like making sure the drums are in tune and making sure
Yeah. Mm.
uh, guitars are set up properly. And like I said, then anything you record is going to start sounding good right from the bat. You know.
Yeah, 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 yeah. So, is there any album from that era, from let's say around that kind of grunge time, anything that really kind of made you, I say proud? You obviously got to be proud of everything you've worked on, but is there anything that stands out? One thing, one particular album that you really go,
Um,
Well, I mean, obviously you must be proud of everything.
well, no, I mean it's weird because I always had this thing that I was fighting because I always wanted to be the artist, so I always had that, and I felt kind of like I look at it now and I'm like, wow, how lucky I was to be. At least I got to work on those records. That's a dream of a lot of people's things, but I was so concentrated on other things, um, and advancing in that way that, yeah, I mean, I feel more lucky than proud to be that those records did so well, and I got to benefit from the credits from those. I learn just like I said, the learning experience and being able. Now I look at it a lot more in a sense of, especially now that I see how things are different. That I was lucky enough to see these classic records being made right in front of me, and being part of it, of making them. Sometimes I don't feel that big of a part of it,
No, no,
like,
yeah,
uh,
yeah. But you were
but
there. You were there in that moment. You were part. You were
yeah, and that's,
part of it.
helping with the sounds and all those things.
I think we all
Uh,
look at ourselves. We kind of analyze ourselves as engineers a little bit sometimes and go, "Yeah, okay, I did my little bit," but then you don't realize how big a part of that. You do realize, but you don't. You look at it and go.
yeah, I
Sometimes
definitely
I step back and I go, "Yeah, I did that." I've just had 80,000 people stood behind me. You know,
yeah,
you
yeah.
know. Uh,
You would know as that
mm,
it's sometimes a thing, can be somewhat thankless job or something, but
yeah,
and I mean, I became, without desiring it, I liked it. I'm a pretty good engineer. I ended up learning how to get sounds in studios. And I learned how more important, I learned how to make records, which I still don't know if people really grasp the understanding of that, the lost art of making records, just because we don't have the budgets these days. We don't have the time. We don't have It's just not done like that anymore. Where I really started feeling proud is records I produced, which was a natural progression, being an artist and a songwriter, and then coming up under Rick and watching and getting signed myself and working with other major producers. Uh, I felt more of a calling to that, and then uh, but by the time I was doing that, and some of the first budgets I was getting to do that from labels, the industry was starting to have its downfall with Napster
Mm.
and the internet and things, and all of a sudden budgets were drying up and studios were closing in Los Angeles, and I was like, wait, I'm here now. Like, I'm
Yeah,
finally here. And
yeah.
I was meeting with all the labels, and I really, and I got to do a few records, and those I felt much more part of because I was so entrenched in the production and working with the band and developing them and discovering a couple and getting them signed. I felt that was really nice because I felt like that really helped somebody's career. They really got. But then, unfortunately, it felt horrible too because if they got dropped or broke up or whatever happened, it was like, wow, that's kind of heartbreaking. So I got to experience kind of all of it.
So the transition from obviously using tape in the 90s and all that old kind of analog gear to moving over to the digital side, digital product. Did you find that quite hard to move over?
No, no, that was yeah, interesting time. So
Because it was very interesting in the live world, especially around 2000, because we've gone from
oh, I
big
can imagine in the live world. It was
you know,
just as interesting, different, but interesting. So even after I got the deal, my deal, and I went back into production, even through that whole decade, the whole '90s to the 2000s, there, I was still part of London Bridge. Just I'd kind of left, but I always worked for the brothers in the studio. An engineer producer named John Plum, kind of took my spot and filled in. He ended up doing the Blind Melon record and things like that. But I still worked for the studio, and I was around all of it, and then bringing in my own work, trying to get my production career going, kind of freelancing. Um, so when that changeover started happening, I was starting to produce then and bring in projects. Well, actually, some of the last projects I did with Rick was right during that period. We were doing a record for a band on Capitol, I believe, and I had already invested in 8-track version of Pro Tools, which was Digidesign. It was like
yeah, yeah,
Sessions, it was called,
yeah, yeah,
and made by Avid. What they're called that then? They're called Digidesign then.
yeah. It was digital
And
design. Hmm.
I was already playing with it with my stuff, and tripping on it because I would fly. I had ADATs, and I would fly things from. ADATs came out, which changed everything really because we got a couple. I got an ADAT, and I'd bring them into the studio, and I could get in between records, and I'd get local bands or whatever to do demos with me. And I was trying to discover people, and it was cheaper. We could do an ADAT, and Rick and Roger would give me a break on the studio time for them because they were local, and we're doing it on ADATs and things like that. And when I got this Digidesign, my first computer set up, and I could bounce stuff over, and I could bounce it back again, but I could cut parts without cutting tape. Mind blowing. And I was playing, I was kind of messing around with industrial music and samples and experimenting all over. So then I could sample things, and I started going mad scientist on that. And I'm telling Rick, like, this is where it's at. And there's a little place upstairs at London Bridge that I took over and used like a little B room. And I was
Right.
doing all that stuff in there. And he'd come up and look at what I was doing and kind of sneer at me, stuff like this. And we always had this weird kind of brotherly competition, weird thing with each other. And but he loved the digital. He was turned on to digital because he wanted to be able to edit
Right.
like mixes and arrangements because that would go with his pre-production. And he was so he got an Akai digital 4-track big
Oh yeah,
machine
yeah, 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 yeah.
and optical disc, I believe it was on. And he started playing with that, and people were hating it. Oh, he's messing our songs up because they were really hard edits and all that. So there, it's coming into the studio world. It's starting to brew in there, and Pro Tools is growing, and I'm like, I'm going all in because it was my way to be unique. So I'm going all in. I'm going and so started investing my own money, bringing in Pro Tools rig, and it was still 16-bit at the time. Rick wasn't totally won over yet. So like I said, the last couple of projects I did with him, Capital, we had a Pro Tools rig, and but he didn't trust it yet, and sound quality wasn't totally there. So we were syncing. I had back then there was actual reps, and there was a rep in Portland, which was a city over from Seattle, and he would drive up because I call him like, we need. How do you do this? How do you do that? Because there's no and it was crude technology still. Stuff didn't work. The hard drives were horrible. It fit, everything was risky and no YouTube to find out how anything worked. And
Yeah,
so
yeah.
we had to figure out and sync Pro Tools to the 2-inch because the only way Rick would work on it with doing a real record for a label was that. So here we are syncing it, and it was a nightmare. And I'm learning that, and we're moving tracks back and forth. Once it came out, and we got the Apogee, and it went 24-bit. Rick rolled the 2-inch Studer tape machine. We did all that famous, rolled it into the live room behind the piano, and
Really?
he was digital and Pro Tools from then on
Wow.
out.
Wow.
Because once he saw what he could do
Wow.
with cutting and arranging, it
So,
changed
so
everything.
he was a
But
total convert then. He was,
he convert like overnight. Like I
wow.
said, we dragged his feet and like he wouldn't purchase it. Where he using mine, he started renting mine from me because I'm like, I want my system, and he's like, yeah, and and uh and I said, like I told you, we had to sync it to the 2-inch. It was a nightmare. They didn't have any fancy cool thing that worked. Design finally came out with the not USD. What was it? Yeah, I don't know. They had some kind of syncing box that finally came out. We'd run SMPTE, and it started working. We had it going. We finally eventually got it working pretty good. And then later things like Clasp and different boxes were built that were better. But by the time those were better, everybody just stopped using tape anyway. I learned. I went through all the heartache, losing incredibly important sessions on hard drives crashing. I remember I was doing producing sessions in LA. I'd moved on and still early days of Pro Tools. I brought a rig down there. One of the first guys had a full rig in Los Angeles, and I was renting it to people. And it's what got me through not making any money in LA is because I was renting it before the studios were buying them. That's how early on I was. And I had a session with we had a big manager, and I had to call the manager, and I lost the session. And there was nobody like
Wow.
like you'd get people say, "Oh, I know a guy that works at Microsoft. He might be able to help you." And you're like, they don't know anything about Pro Tools or hard drives for audio because there was just nobody doing it. So
Yeah.
yeah, I was there right when it was
Wow.
brutal.
Wow. Really brutal. So, are there any pieces of gear, vintage pieces of gear that you had in the 90s that you can't live without today then?
Well, yeah, I've always been a hybrid person, and you have to be in this industry. It also, I guess, it depends too what kind of music you're mainly doing. If you're doing full on electronic stuff and I mean, I see these genius young engineers that are just doing stuff on FL or Ableton guys are just blowing my mind. They don't need any vintage gear, you know,
Yeah.
or they're mimicking lo-fi and vintage sounds with plugins, and it works great for what they're doing. Um, but if I'm doing a rock record in the studio, obviously, a great console, if you can track something on a Neve console or whatever. And there's so many pieces of gear I love for particular reasons. I'm a big fan of Manly gear. Uh, I I have a particular Focusrite ISA, the good blue Focusrite series, a producer pack that I have from the very first ones that came out. Uh, that I love. They're known to be clean, and I find them the most colored preamp ever, so I don't know what that's all about. If you ever look them up, they're renownedly known to be clean and pristine, and I find it incredibly colored. So I use it for that. Um, I don't know. I love I mean, there's so many great pieces of gear. The Cush Audio stuff. I mean, so many. But I've gotten to a point where to live without thing. I've had to work in so many situations. Been lucky enough to work some of the best places with the best gear to garages, um, like for real, and products good records that came out that I've recorded tracks in the garage. Um, I did a drum kit with 357s because that's all they had. We did drums there, and it worked out great. I've done, and then nowadays I do so much remote mixing.
Right.
I can get stuff tracked in a studio. Sometimes tracked in a good studio, tracked badly.
Hmm.
Like I'll pull up, I'm like, really? I pull up these, I'm like, ooh, wow, okay, and or tracked really great, or tracked in a some guys, home setup that they did, or I got some stuff from Switzerland recently that
Right.
had, for whatever reason, a mic on the drum and an overhead, or the kick drum and overhead, and a room, but nothing on the snare. And
That
I was
was it.
kind of like, well,
Kicking it
you,
up. Really?
yeah, I just thought at the time, I was just thinking, and that worked. I made it work, but I was like, why didn't you just put a snare in the
Yeah. Yeah.
mic on the snare just because?
Wow.
But it's weird. So the point being is I get things, and at first I used to like go, oh no, what am I gonna do? And now it's like, with plugins and Pro Tools, like I found I can make almost anything work.
Right.
And it drove home. That's full circle here. What we were talking in the beginning is that, for instance, a band from Switzerland recorded with really minimalistic recording stuff, songs, and the singer were fantastic, and the thing worked. I get the same month another session coming from the West Coast of states here, recorded in the studio, wonderful studio, an amazing API legacy console, and all this stuff, and I couldn't. It it didn't turn out good at all because the band and the songs weren't good,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it's amazing, just how that truly works. And so, like I said, come full circle to that. So with Pro Tools in these days, um, and all the right plugins, and there's so many, you really can make almost anything work. And I don't these days. I for a long time I was mixing using outboard along with it, but now I don't. I really just track. I'll track with obviously the best outboard I can get depending on the situation, and then
You very much work in the box now then?
I work completely in the box now,
Mm. Mm.
and I dragged my feet on it for a long time, but
Yeah. Yeah.
it's at the point now where, yeah, obviously for recall reasons, things like that. But I think there's a bigger thing, and I don't know if people talk about it that much, but I don't think I could necessarily go and make a if somebody said, okay, you have time to go mix it in the studio on this Neve console or SSL or whatever, sure, you can do a good job. But if you're really talking about, like, say it was a major label record, I would have to say, no, I've got to do it in the box. And reason being, I don't feel you can make a competitive production wise, being that the songs are great and it's a great artist and all that. Competitiveness with other records like on that are being put out today in the commercial world. There's so many you're putting so much uh compression and loudness and
Yeah.
tricks and sauce on it that's done in a computer now that we take for granted that if I'm just mixing it through the box, and it's like, even if I have a rack of compressors, it's not like the amount of compressors or EQs, or I mean, it's not uncommon for somebody to have three compressors and three more EQs on one track of many tracks in Pro Tools. And like, you can't do that. Like, everything is so blown up now on, as far as loudness and compression and EQ'd and polished and all that, that if you're making, anything that's going to get released to go to radio and compete with modern day pop recordings, you kind of got it.
Then obviously you're a guitarist, played drums and things. Do you think that's, and I have this question, quite a lot with a lot of engineers, and it's a bit of a debate I have. Do you think musical knowledge is important as an engineer?
Yeah.
I
I
I
I
I would say so,
I
personally.
totally think so.
I have this debate,
Although
you know?
although I have known some that weren't. I've actually
Mm.
known some that weren't that became players,
Yeah, yeah.
inter
Right, okay.
interestingly enough.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, I think it can be done, and I've seen, like, people who especially people who that's all they wanna be, like, they're an
Yeah,
engineer.
yeah, yeah,
Um, and some of them have, small bits of knowledge or play, they can kinda play, but they're not players or anything like that. But I think it does. Like, going back to the early stories I was telling you, I think just being in a band and having that ability, for me, or helped a lot in the studio, being able, and as a producer, being able to communicate
yeah,
in
yeah.
that band guy kinda dialogue
Mhm.
or feel, and talking across, through the on the talk back through the glass. Uh, but yeah, and being like for me and a lot of stuff I worked on, being a guitar player helped getting guitar sounds and
Yeah.
just being
I think
understanding the concept of the different pedals they might be using or things like that.
it's good to be on both sides of the fence, I think.
Yeah,
Uh,
I mean,
you
totally.
said
I mean, I wish I was a better piano player. I wish I was a better drummer. I wish I was a better all those things because it would have just made me better
I wish I was as
engineer and all
well.
those
I
things,
wish I was better at
you
these.
know?
I really.
Uh, it all makes you better. Well, especially if you're referring to or leading to, like, for somebody who wants to do it today, I think the producers and engineers and artists in general, I should say, artists of today are all the above. The future of it is you're an engineer as far as running your Ableton or your Logic Audio or FLC or whatever it is, Pro Tools. You're a player, you're a programmer, you know,
You everything.
you're everything. The artist now has become all encompassed in everything,
Yeah.
um,
Mm.
which is great and it gives you more freedom. So yeah, every single thing more of,
And
uh,
so if you were
better.
if you were talking to, if someone came up to you and said, "Dave, I wanna be an engineer. How do I get into the industry? How I wanna be a studio engineer." What would you say the first thing would be for them to do?
You know what's funny about that? Last week, I had this guy contact me. Somebody else had given him my information, and he was 19, and that's his thing. And I kind of hate those calls because I'm like, I don't know what to tell. It's because it's not like that anymore. It's not like what it was when I started doing it because there's not the studios there were. There's not, well, mainly because there's not labels, and there's not labels in the sense there are labels, but not like there were then where they're signing new artists and there's budgets to go into studio time and all those things. And
Mhm.
even then, studios didn't hire you. You were mostly freelance or worked by, you didn't go out and just get a job at studios. Not like people think you do anyway. You weren't on salary or something, and you can't make money. So financially, it's just ridiculous. And you weren't getting points as an engineer or anything, so there's no royalties and things like that. So in that regard, it's like everything else in the world. It's get
Yeah.
on YouTube and get on Instagram and show what you can do. I mean, that's kind of what it is. But I think, like I say, where it's going now is, but you can teach yourself everything. There is YouTube, there is everything. You can get your own program, get really good at it, get a sampler, get really good at that, be really good at programming beats, get really good at, if you're a vocalist singing and then showing yourself doing that online.
Yeah.
That's the game now, right?
I always use the term stagecraft. Learn your stagecraft, you know?
Right. And
Learn
then
your
show it
gear.
off
Yeah,
online because that's how people see, "Oh, he can do that."
yeah.
And, uh, and just like anything, there's downfalls to how things work now,
Mhm.
but it wasn't there's tons of downfalls how things worked then too. There's so much gatekeeping on stuff. But then, you could get if you did do well, you could get royalties and things like that. You could get signed, and that was fun. Now you don't want to get signed because you can't get it, and Spotify doesn't pay anything. So every
Yeah.
era is going to have its ups and downs, and now there's the threat of AI or this or that. But anything and everything is a threat or a downside in any era, and it's just how you spin it and how you work it for yourself.
You just mentioned that word, AI. What's your take on it?
What's my take on AI? Well, I think I'm fascinated by it. I think it's completely inevitable that it's gonna be the most.
Because with some plugins, it's great.
AI in general is going to be our world, whether we
Yeah,
like it or not.
yeah, yeah.
As far as in the music industry as of right now, I think once again it's so exponential. So what we're looking at now is just such the basic beginning of it that is, we don't even know how good it's going to be, and very quickly. Um, how that affects music, and I've done a lot of thinking about it. I think, to make it short, the shortest answers I can give you is I think it's probably undoubtedly going to take over in certain areas and take jobs. I think, eventually it's too easy to be able to use that for syncing and film music or for commercial TV or whatever, wherever it is, corporations can utilize that and make it easier for them and not pay somebody. It's going to go there. I think it's inevitable. Um, but you know, until humans don't really exist on the planet or the hybrids of us take over completely, I think that there's always going to be a need for us to, or a want, even if it's out there, you're still going to want, you're going to be entertained by doing something with another human being and doing that. And it might be even more attractive then because of the AI. And so there's going to be that thing that we enjoy, just like anything that becomes nostalgia, we still do it. We don't have to, but we like doing it.
I think in some ways
So
it can be quite useful. It's when it becomes, you know, in the not I say in the wrong hands, but used for the wrong purpose, you know.
yeah, yeah,
And I'm talking in music.
yeah. In music though, it's kind of like I said, I think it'll be used in ways to for commercial, general public stuff. It's going to get used, but like I said, I still think that. So when we said the same things about when digital came out or MIDI or sequencers or anything like that or auto tune, and now we use auto tune like freaking crazy on everything, and we abuse it. So we might be abused. We use skipping CD sounds now as a whole genre of glitch, and so AI could be the same. So at first I was kind of tripped out about, oh God, we're gonna, and then like it doesn't. I mean, that happens every decade and it will happen even more and more and more. So I just feel like the more it does, I think it's going to also have that backlash. And then, I mean, look at now, I can go on YouTube and see guys who are totally dedicated to only using lo-fi stuff from the 70s and tape machines they're finding off eBay, blah, blah. So imagine now the more AI and things come, the more there's going to be people who are only doing what we're doing right now, or only using Upwork, or only using real guitar, playing guitar. So it's I think one thing goes, it feeds the other. It's like this
Yeah, yeah,
chases its own tail. So it doesn't worry me. The little tricks and things that come in with plugins here and there, cool. I haven't seen there. I keep waiting for some. Everything now is advertised AI plugin or AI this, and they're not really AI. It's not really doing
yeah,
AI type of things. And if
mm,
they are, nothing's really impressed me yet. There's nothing I'm going, oh, that just changed everything for me. But
yeah.
I'm sure
Nothing,
there will be. There's
nothing.
like new AI EQ came out, stuff
Yeah,
like that.
yeah,
I, I don't know. People are acting like it's me. It's okay.
yeah. I saw something the other day. I think, it might have
It's
been today actually.
cool.
Yeah, auto EQ. You don't
That's
need
what
to
I'm
do
talking about. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, and it's like what? And they're
I
all
mean, yeah,
talking
it's
about it
okay.
now.
It's another
But
it's basically like pressing another preset button.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um,
I mean, we've got that in digital consoles in the live world. We can
yeah,
create
I would think.
create libraries of different EQ. I mean, obviously you can with
I
other.
would think, especially they're like designed to, specifically notch out frequencies and get rid of
Yeah, yeah,
feedback and control things like that.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I think
Um,
I think it's interesting in some ways, you know, but it can be quite, I say scary, but quite, you know,
I
when
think with live, I would be more open to it because it's such a quick pressure job gig that I think any kind of tool like that that I could use to save me would be nice.
yeah,
Studio wise, like if it adds to my creativity, cool. If it helps other people get mixers faster and better, not need a person to mix them, I mean, that might happen. Um, I'd be guilty of using it myself, so, you know,
so are you
it is
recording
what it
any of
is,
your
really.
own music at the moment? Are you doing any you could just
Yeah, I'm
stay
constantly trying to.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm working on a record, uh, and then I get pulled into other records or working on other people, so it drags forever, but that's what keeps me, creatively sane. So, and the last years here, I've always dabbled and back and forth with electronic music, which has always been nice to like. I'm always working on rock records or other people's records, doing that. It's a different flavor, and I just really enjoy the creativeness behind
And do you
just the
prefer that
endless
analog stuff?
possibilities.
The
What
do you prefer the
I
electronic?
do right now, you know, I bet you when I'm done with this record, I hope to put something out beginning of next year, but um, I might try to do a guitar thing. I always try to work my guitar into it, and everybody's expecting that from me, and I feel obligated to, in so many ways, and it just never really works. I don't know why. I have all these guitars, and I guess me not being in a band or playing with people, I struggle making guitar stuff that I feel is
You need to get back
valid
in
in
the
any
band,
way.
Dave. You need to get back playing, mate. That's what you need
I
to do.
know, you know, I if there was a situation that allowed that, I would totally do that. I'd totally be that old guy back in a band again.
Oh, that's
Um,
2 old guys. I'll join you,
I
you
would
know?
love to do that, and get my chops. I would love to. It's really uninspiring just to be a guy with a guitar in the room for me. I don't know, and I feel like I'm playing the same old stuff, and I can't. I need to reinvent myself as a guitarist, and so I find myself just going down this endless hole though with electronic music, and especially Ableton. I'm constantly learning new things, or you get something else, and I've been there's a artist named Breakins with a
Okay.
B, Breakins, and young guy. He's from Ohio, which is the state over from where I'm at, and just well, once again, songwriting. The guy can write a song on acoustic guitar. Like you hear his productions, and it's just over the top, glitchy, super creative.
Wow.
Sounds fantastic. Breaks every rule you can imagine and makes it sound good. Um, but he can take that song that you could never imagine, it's so electronic based and so Ableton computer based music,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
play it on an acoustic guitar. He like
Wow.
has his shorts and he goes live, he plays live and he'll play it on guitar. I'm like, well, there we go again. Always goes back to the song. And it's amazing because you would have never thought that when you hear the version you hear.
Yeah, yeah.
But it's so over the top. And but his production skills uh in being a guy on a computer are just phenomenal. And so like that stuff like gives me hope when I see young guys, you know, really going out. Like I can't I like I'm been studying this record that he does and people tutorials online trying to figure out half the stuff he does. It's so cool.
Wow.
Um,
And
but
how
he
old's
can
the guy? Is he a young guy, you
he's
say?
young, he's like early 20s, like no more than 23, I think.
Blimey neck.
And he's yeah, and it's
My kids are that
not
age.
using the word lightly, it's genius. Like it's really good. Even if you
Wow.
don't like that style of music, you got to go, wow, there's some hours put in on that, you know, you can tell. So anyway, so that kind of stuff keeps me alive creatively and not feeling like I'm just playing D, G, and F chords on my guitar, I guess, you know, and trying to write another song that sounds like it. So creatively, that keeps my spark going and
Great.
keeps me motivated artistically and
Have you got a date in mind for when you're gonna get the album finished, or is it just an ongoing process?
yeah, it's like yes and no. I'm one of those people too who have these deadlines all the time, but I also kind of know at this point if this record for me isn't my best work, I'm going to be really disappointed because I the last one I put out, I think I put one out in 2022, I think, called Skylines, and I didn't I rushed it out as something to do, and it was kind of just some collection of things I was playing around with. And I just felt like I gotta put something out, and I just did. And now I'm like, look back and like, I'm not that proud of it as much, and I didn't push it, and the people I put it out with, just kind of didn't do anything, and and then I got busy working on other people's records, and I just let it die. So I don't want that to happen again.
Yeah, yeah,
So I'm trying to be a little, without delaying it forever, I'm trying to be a little more focused on it and
yeah,
have, make
yeah,
it a thing.
yeah, yeah.
Uh,
So is there any artists you're currently working with at the moment, or any projects you're working, anything
um,
exciting in the
no,
pipeline coming up?
nothing really. I get a lot of remote work, doing a lot of mixes, turning around. I just did uh, just this last week. An interesting project for some unreleased stuff from Lane Staley from Alice in Chains. So this was stuff that he did with a guy named Ron Holt. I might have mentioned him earlier. He was the guy that I talked about, had a 4-track that influenced me. Well, he was part of that, and Lane was friends with him too. And Lane sang songs with him
Hmm.
in his mom's basement, and I used to go over there too, and so sang some of the same songs actually back then
Wow.
when we were all trying to learn and get better and write songs and do things. And Ron was a little ahead of us. He was better player and songwriter, and he had the 4-track, and he was doing all these things. Um, and then later on in years, Ron's brother Jesse, another very talented musician and writer himself, had a band called Second Coming, and they ended up getting signed to Capitol. And Lane would come on stage and do songs with them, and so there was and they stayed friends. And Lane eventually ended up giving Ron's brother Jesse some money to go back in the studio and finish some of the tracks. But they're all half done, and they've been floating around forever. And so Lane's estate, and there was like, it was too hard to release anything or finish anything because of getting the rights. Finally, I guess all that was taken care of after years of playing around with it, and it got a deal and got a little bit of budget. So he flew out to my studio, and he, before he came out, recreated a bunch of the tracks, did a lot of restoring, taking tapes and moving, 1-inch tapes and different 4-tracks and putting them on the computer, and a lot of like rebuilding of stuff and saving stuff. And so we got the green light to go ahead, and he came here for me to mix it. And it was a kind of nice full circle because
Wow.
I was friends with them way back when. We all started when we were, just kids beginning and learning.
Fantastic.
Lane became a rock star, obviously, and
Yeah,
passed
yeah.
away now. And now here we are putting out this stuff. On the same note, it's so different. Um, has nothing to do with Alice in Chains, really. I mean, it doesn't sound anything like it.
Is it
It's
quite emotional though, listening to it? Is it
well, yeah, doing it itself was a
be quite
trip
hard?
in a
Yeah,
way,
yeah.
and more so, not just because, oh, here's Lane's vocals
Mm.
soloed up and doing so, but there were songs I worked on too with Ron, and we had versions, and that it was Ron, and Ron recently passed away, and none of his stuff ever got released before. Now it's getting a chance, and it's Lane. So yeah, and then here's me and Jesse, his brother, working on it together in my place in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Like, who would have thought? Like it was a trip for sure, and I think we did a really good job on it. I don't. Now it's in the label's hands. I don't know if they like those mixes. I don't know. It's really weird because it's how people interpret it. These are like, it's not. It's Lane before he was Lane. You knew. He's
Right.
not even singing his songs. He's singing somebody else's songs. But there's shit. There's definitely talent all over it. It's just, there's a lot, Ron was very influenced by Prince and Minneapolis funk, along with rock. And if you ever see any old interviews with Lane, he talks about what Prince was such a big influence on, one of his favorites. So you see that early on. So there's a lot of that stuff. So I think your typical Alice in Chains person looking for like the lost, dirt tracks or
Yeah,
something
yeah, yeah.
will be disappointed because it's nothing like that. But
Well,
if for somebody like wanting to see a journey of an artist from where before they know who they are to where they are, and just the whole encompassing of unseen or heard of Seattle, pre-Seattle scene
Yeah,
in
yeah.
the suburbs of Seattle, then it's an interesting,
Wow,
trip.
wow.
But yeah, it was fun to work on. I don't know what's gonna happen with it now. We'll see. But
Wow.
it was cool for a personal thing. It was cool to do.
Yeah, I can imagine. I can imagine. It must have been, yeah, quite emotional, really, for
Yeah.
you to,
Yeah,
you know.
it was a trip. We every once he was out here for a week and we like every once in a while, so I go, this is a trip. We just kinda go, isn't this weird? And little things would come up, or we'd hear Ron, there'd be tapes and we'd hear Ron say something that if he had a very specific sense of humor, and then we would get and we'd start laughing and, things like that. So there's a lot of that. But yeah, then in general, I'm open. I take people can reach me on Instagram and stuff and reach out to me and send me if they're working on tracks and I mix them here and then send them back. I've been using this new software Muse where now I can like you can listen to the mixes and write on the DAW and I can like or I can help somebody else mix. I'm doing that kind of coaching, mentoring where if you're having, you know, you want to get your mix, you're not getting there, I can like see your DAW and I can be on Pro Tools, you can be on Logic, it doesn't matter. It's really working out well and you can see each other and talk just like this, but I can like take over your screen and I can run your plug-in, I can move your faders, makes the
Could you imagine saying this in the 90s?
I know, right? And well, even for a long time, I've heard there's been things around for the last few years, but this I just tried and it actually works. Like, there's no latency. The audio quality you hear right out of my DAW, and I hear right out of your DAW. Or if you don't have a DAW too, like, you can just be looking on my session. So, it makes it the whole remote working thing so much easier.
Yeah, 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 absolutely. Dave, it's been absolutely fascinating listening to your story and talking to you. Where can we all find you?
Um, well,
On
Instagram's a good
socials?
place to start. I've got, um, davehillismusic.com, uh, website is down at this very moment just because 'cause I'm revamping it, but that'll be up, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And those are, like, the best ways,
So
if people yeah.
Instagram is what is it? Dave Hillis Music?
Yep,
Is it? Dave Hillis
yeah,
Music on Instagram and
and you can
your
Goo if you could Google me, I think things come up, so
yeah,
pretty
things come.
easy to find me.
I'm sure we'll find a lot of things on Google on the you
Yeah,
know, on all the credits.
don't go to OnlyFans, though.
No,
Skip that one.
that's a different gig, mate. That's a different
Yeah,
gig.
it's a different audience for me. But no, yeah, so easy. You can find me on Instagram. That's pretty easy.
Fantastic.
Reach out to me if anybody's looking for.
Brilliant, brilliant. Thank you very much. It's been
I appreciate the talk.
absolutely fascinating to talk to you.
I got to
Uh,
interview you now about
yeah.
all your
Well
live work that I
well,
am afraid to do.
you can interview me as much as you want. It won't be as fascinating as you.
Oh,
Your
I
story,
don't know.
you know. I mean, I'm gonna be in a field all summer, I think, somewhere.
Yeah, you do the scary work. I think front of house and big concerts like that is scary work.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's interesting how the 2 worlds do, collide, but at the same time, they're very far apart as well, you know, in
Yeah,
language,
yeah. I dipped
live
my
art
toe in
in
it,
the
and
world.
it was too scary for me. I was like, ah,
I think, I mean, yeah, I mean, it's more, let's say, festivals and things like that,
yeah,
as you know, I've got Glastonbury coming up but we've got 15-minute changeovers for big artists.
yeah.
Big
That's
artists.
scary stuff to me.
So that's,
See,
that's
when I think the live stuff, I'd rather be backstage or on stage than in front of a board, the front of house.
I had a meeting today and I'm kind of questioning that myself. So, right.
All
Brilliant.
right.
Thank
Well,
you very
thanks.
much.
I appreciate the time and,
Yeah. And, you stay safe and, yeah, take care out there and we'll all catch you. We're going to stop this recording and, we'll see you out there sometime.
all right.
Cheers, Dave.
Cheers.